We're back at it with another episode of Talkin MMA. We're picking up some serious momentum here. We're on episode number 7 now. Don't be shy to follow us on all platforms. We got Instagram, TikTok, Twitter. You could listen in. If you're listening on YouTube now and watching, like and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. You could also listen in on Spotify and Anchor FM as an alternative option. Hope everyone's been doing well. And as usual, I want to get right into it because we had a pretty long weekend of fights across 2-3 promotions. Let's start with the UFC. We have UFC Fight Night 48, Jamal Hill versus Johnny Walker. You know, it was a fight that went pretty much for the most part the way I figured it would until that whole finish. You know, Johnny Walker fought the fight he usually does. Jamal Hill fought the fight he usually does. Johnny Walker looked like the more technical fighter because he is a very technical fighter. He's a very skilled fighter. He's very good. He was outlanding him early, throwing a lot of leg kicks, a lot of kicks to the body early in the fight. And he was just outpointing him, you know, overall. He was just outpointing him. He was winning the round. He went for a takedown, winning the clinching exchange. He's just doing a better job overall, controlling the fight overall. Jamal Hill was being very patient, very tentative, and that's usually what he likes to do. Jamal Hill is a guy who doesn't mind giving up rounds before setting up that big shot. Like if it's going to take him a few rounds, 1-2 rounds to set up the big shot, he will read your movements, figure you out, and set up that big shot and put you out. He's a guy that he's got power in that right hand. So he is to be respected, you know. It was a very good fight. Again, that right hand, man, was just landed right on the temple, and it was kind of like a goofy KO almost. Like, you know, Johnny Walker looked fairly... Like that KO, I'd say, describes his personality almost ironically. The way he went down in that knockout is very similar to just the way he acts, his mannerisms. He's just a very goofy guy at nature, very funny guy. And people love him for it. But it was just, and obviously that wasn't intentional. You know, how could it be, right? But it's just ironic the way that played out. But again, it's also just sad because you're looking at a guy who's lost 4 of his last 5 fights. You know, you're looking at a guy who started out 4-0 in the UFC. And was looking like the next big thing, you know, the next big challenger to John Jones. Can he be the guy? And not only is he beating guys at 4-0, he's beating guys with flair. You know, he's flying knees, spinning back fists, you name it, he does it. Or he did it. But, you know, Jamal Hill is a guy that, watch out, because he's coming now. You know, what was he on, a 2-3 fight win streak now? I believe he did get finished by Paul Gregg a few fights ago. Yeah. Lost to Paul Craig a few fights ago, that first round KO. Ever since then, look, he beat Jimmy Crute, beat Johnny Walker. That's 2 very solid wins at 205. Very solid. So again, Johnny Walker is a guy who, listen, he's had his tough breaks in the past. You know, we can't deny that. But is he a bum? No. Not by any means necessary is he a bum. He's not bad at all. He's actually a very good fighter, a very skilled fighter who maybe has just made mistakes. We know he's under the guidance of John Kavanaugh now. So, you know, how's that going to play out? How's that work? You know, a lot of guys take some time to adjust to a new camp. So maybe, you know, that's what it is in his last couple fights. But if you look at the Thiago Santos fight, like, he looked very good in that fight. You know, he was going head-to-head with a guy in a very competitive fight that could have gone either way. He was going head-to-head with a guy that had gone head-to-head with John Jones with pretty much one leg and gone all the way with him. All the way to the distance, very close fight. A split decision. You know, a guy who's also fought the who's who at 205, Thiago Santos has. And, you know, Johnny Walker went toe-to-toe with him. So to say that, you know, Johnny Walker's like a bum, you know, he's absolutely not a bum, you know? So it's going to be interesting to see what's next for him. It's going to be interesting to see what's next for Jamal Hill. We had mentioned this in the last episode that this was more of like, it didn't bear much relevancy to the 205 division in terms of like the top 5 or like a new championship contender. But like we knew that they were pretty much just going to switch places in the rankings. 10, 12. You know, one was 10, one was 12. This was pretty much just going to be the fight for number 10 in the rankings. But again, Jamal Hill looks like a much better option at number 10 than Johnny Walker, given the setbacks that Johnny's had. You know, you look at Jamal Hill, you know, he's 10-1. Had that one no contest and the loss of Paul Craig. Other than that, you know, he's won his 5 fights in the UFC. So he's not to be messed with. If we look at the rankings right now at 205, potentially in terms of what could be next for him, you know, he is number 10. But if you look at the top like 7 or so, look, Jan 1, Yuri 2, Rakic 3, Anthony Smith 4, Thiago Santos 5, Magomed Ankalaev 6, Dominic Reyes 7. You know, maybe Dominic Reyes versus Jamal Hill. Maybe Volkan Oezdemir. Like, I'd say he could definitely fight someone in that 7 to 9 range. That's probably next for him. I don't see anyone in the top 5. We know Thiago Santos is fighting Magomed Ankalaev. You know. Hell, if he wants to fight Anthony Smith, who's ranked number 4, I mean, you know, he's stuck around in the rankings. That would be a good fight for him. Definitely would be a good fight. A fight like that might even go similar to the Johnny Walker fight where Anthony Smith is sort of outpointing him early on and then maybe he lands a big shot. So who knows? And we're talking about an interesting division, a wide-open 205 division that's had multiple title changes, you know? So let's see what happens with Jamal Hill, you know? Again, I'd say it was a more important fight for Jamal Hill than it was for Johnny Walker, given the setbacks Walker's had. So it's going to be interesting to see what's next. You know, a Volkan Oezdemir fight would be interesting against Jamal Hill. A Dominic Reyes fight would be extremely interesting against Jamal Hill. So it was definitely a good win for him. You know, we also had Jim Miller tying the all-time win record in the UFC. You know, congratulations, legend in the sport. And how interesting would a Jim Miller versus Cowboy Cerrone fight be next? You know, how interesting would that be? Like, I'm sure everyone would love to see that fight. That would be a super interesting fight given the storyline and everything. So imagine like a record breaker kind of fight. Just imagine that. That would be a great fight to like open up a pay-per-view or to like main event a fight night. It would be unbelievable. Obviously, we also had Bare Knuckle FC KnuckleMania 2. You know, it was a bare knuckle event. And I kind of want to talk a little bit about the, you know, the 2 fights that were on the card. We had Chad Mendes versus Joshua Alvarez, and then we had Mike Perry versus Julian Lane. And, you know, the Chad Mendes fight, it was a fight that, you know, Chad clearly was winning the whole time. You know, whether he was outpointing him or not, you know, you could debate that. I'm sure the numbers were fairly close, but he dropped him like 3-4 times in that fight. So it was fairly obvious who won the fight. If you look at Joshua, he was walking him down the whole fight, controlling center of the ring, and he was looking. But the thing is, he wasn't really. Most times when people do that, they're more so the aggressor, right? He wasn't throwing that many shots for someone who's walking him down. He was trying to counterpunch way too much even when it wasn't even there. And Chad was just swinging, man. Chad was, if you guys saw, Chad was throwing kill shots. Like, there'd be times where Alvarez would break away. Like, he'd do, like, a defensive movement, just move back. And you just see Mendes throw, like, 3, like, just absolute power hooks to his head. That if he would have landed, man, that would have just, you know, broken his head off. But it was, you know, it was a good fight for Mendes. Walked away relatively unscathed, no real cuts, which is kind of shocking for a BKFC fight, but we'll get into that. But, you know, it was a good card. You know, it was actually a pretty deep card, which is interesting for a promotion, you know, that started out this early on pretty much. They're still pretty much in the early stages, right? What are they, a few years in now? So it's interesting that they could put on shows like this early on. And then we had the main event. We had Mike Perry versus, by the way, to talk about the Chad Mendes thing, this promotion's been a little crazy. You know, they've done some pretty hooky stuff in the past. So would it surprise me if someone like Chad Mendes got a title shot? Like, who knows? Why not? We saw Artem Lobov get, like, what, 1-2 wins in the promotion, and he fought for a title, a guy who was pretty much relatively a 500 fighter throughout his UFC career, you know, or throughout his entire career for the most part, relatively a 500 fighter. He was the guy who was fighting for a bare-knuckle world championship. So it's not out of the question that Chad Mendes could be fighting for a BKFC world title in the near future. And then we have a guy in Julian Lane who, you know, very brash guy, very, I guess, rowdy, to say the least, versus a guy in Mike Perry who is pretty much the same guy. Like, they're kind of like the same guy. That's why this was such an interesting fight. And then the whole build-up to the fight was interesting, right? Because they had a little bit of a history. You know, Mike Perry had, what was he at, he was at the commentary for, like, one of the BKFC fights, I guess, promoting his arrival to the company, something like that. And then, you know, you had Julian Lane, who was sitting in the stands behind Mike Perry talking a load of shit. And then they brawled, and it got nasty. Mike Perry took the headset off and said, I'm going to go fuck this guy up. You know, like, so they've hated each other from the start. Then you get to the press conference, and, you know, they're talking wild shit to each other. Mike Perry brings out a plastic bat and attempts to throw it at Julian Lane. Julian Lane thinks it's like a real bat. So he starts talking about his family or something along those lines. So it was heated. It was super heated. And we knew that going in. That's why people saw it. That's why people wanted to watch it. And a lot of MMA fans wanted to watch it because, you know, Mike Perry was a household name. And then obviously Julian Lane is the infamous let me bang guy. He's, you know, if anybody remembers that, it was in one of the Ultimate Fighter seasons that because Julian Lane was on the Ultimate Fighter. And he was just fighting with somebody in the house. I guess he was drunk, something along those lines. And he wanted to fight the guy, and they were holding him back. And he was like, let me bang, bro. Let me bang. And it's like a meme now amongst the MMA community. And it's actually pretty much broken into like a mainstream social media kind of meme as well. Like not just MMA. So it was not just like a fun fight, I guess, stylistically, but the outside stuff, like all that that I just talked about, made it more fun even. And, you know, at the start of the fight, it looked like Lane was more, you know, Lane was more aggressive throughout the whole fight, right? But Lane came at him early, hard, and then Perry just dropped him extremely quick. And then Lane got up, wobbled a little bit, and you're like, oh, shit, like he's hurt. Perry, I guess, tried to capitalize, couldn't. But after that, Lane sort of was more the aggressor early on, was landing some bigger shots. Looked like he was more so controlling it. Then I'd say throughout, like, that middle portion of the fight, Mike Perry started to, like, take over the fight. Mike Perry started to do what he does. And overall, Mike Perry didn't brawl that fight, which was good to see. Mike Perry stayed very composed. Julian Lane was throwing bombs at him at times. And, of course, Mike Perry started throwing combinations at times and let it go a little bit. But overall, Mike Perry was fighting a very composed fight throughout that fight, which was good to see. And I think Mike Perry did win the fight overall because, again, I do think he controlled that entire middle portion of the fight and dropped them bad early on. And then Julian Lane, I'd say, ended the fight with the momentum. And it would have been interesting to see if that fight was like a 10-round fight or like just no time on the clock, because it looked like Julian Lane was almost taken over at the end. Similar to like Jason Knight versus Artem Lobov, I believe the first one, where Jason Knight was just putting it on him at the end of round 5, and it looked like, holy shit, like if there was another round, it might be over. But, yeah, so it was interesting. And then, you know, Mike Perry won. And there was no love lost between those guys, right? Those guys are definitely not fans of each other. So it was interesting. So yeah, that was it for those two. For those two fights. You know, the other fights were fairly good, but just guys that just were fairly unknown or just. Here's my issue that I have with BKFC. I've got 3 issues with BKFC. My first one is this. It's the quality of fighters that they're using. Like, if they were trying to, like, build fighters up there, like, it seems like a lot of what they're based off of in terms of their roster is using old fighters, like, aged fighters. And the irony, like, the bad irony of it is you're using these aged fighters who have already taken damage in a sport where they're taking more damage than they have in any other sport prior that they've done or in any other combat sport prior that they've done, whether it be, you know, grappling, wrestling, MMA, boxing. Like, BKFC, you're literally just throwing punches to the head with no bare knuckle. Like, at least if you were doing MMA bare knuckle, there's other targets, so you're not always going to people's heads, right? BKFC is just constant pounding to the head, pounding to the brain, bare knuckle. Like, that is so fucking bad, and that's why there's so many. It looks so grueling. There's so many cuts. So my problem is they're using these fighters that are just. First of all, I don't love it, to be honest, because it's a little. It kind of makes me cringe a little bit. But the thing is, you're using fighters that are like the worst type of fighter that you want to use for that, pretty much. You know what I mean? Like, you're using guys that are old. Like, that's bad. You're using guys that, you know, have already fought in the UFC, have already fought in Bellator, have already been boxers before. Like, guys that have taken damage. Like, that's not the right guys you want to use for this in a sport where you're in a promotion where you're going to be taking more damage than ever. Like, I don't know. I'm not a fan of it. Another thing is the cuts, which I just mentioned. The cuts are just bad. And here's my issue with the cuts and one issue why. if they want to break into that mainstream, like a UFC, like something like that, it's going to be tough because I'm going to tell you what. Like, do you think a mom, let's say a young audience, for example, and this isn't to sound like a party pooper, because I love it. I'll fucking watch it all day. I'm not talking about myself. I'm just taking it from another person's perspective. You think a mom's going to let her 9, 10, 11, 12-year-old kid buy or watch a pay-per-view, and she walks into the room, there's fucking a cut that, like, I was watching a BKFC event about 2 months ago, and I saw a girl that had like a cut on the side of her head. It was like, the cut was like the length of like half of her face. Like, you think a mom's going to walk into the room and let a kid watch that? Like, that's literally looks like just what they thought of the UFC earlier. You know, that's what it looks like. You look at the hands swollen. You look at the wrap just covered in blood, painted red by the end of the fight in blood. You know, it's hard to watch. And how are you going to promote that to a wider audience, something that grueling? Like, yeah, the UFC could be grueling, but it's no more grueling than boxing, I'd say. Like, boxing, you see pretty nasty cuts, things like that. But, I mean, yeah, you see breaks in the UFC more and all that. But for the most part, it's manageable. You can handle watching it. Like, only sometimes there's stuff that makes you look away from the screen. But it seems like every bare knuckle fight, I'm squinting at the screen almost every 3 seconds. Here is my last issue with bare knuckle of the 3. The no gloves, right? Not only is it bad for fucking health reasons because you're just punching someone in the face bare knuckle, obviously, it's also hard to score. And this is something that I haven't heard anyone talk about so far. I give credit to those BKFC judges that are like, oh, the right hand and the beautiful counter left hook, because I don't see it. I have no idea what you're talking about because I can't even see it. It's almost like the hockey of combat sports in the sense that I can't even see the punches. Because, you know, when you're punching without gloves, the fists are going a lot quicker. Punches are flying a lot faster. And you're just, you know, you're throwing these punches with no when you have gloves on, it's like a big red target on your hands, or a big blue target, or a big black target that says UFC. Like, you could see them, they're targets, so it's a lot easier to like count the punches and see who hits who. It's, again, it's almost like the hockey. It's like the hockey aspect where, like, you ever go to a live hockey game and tell me it's not hard to see the puck. Like, it's a legit problem. Like, the NHL has actually experimented in the past with things to sort of make the puck more vibrant, and it's failed, if I'm not mistaken. So I believe reading some shit like that a long time ago. Like, the NHL used to like experiment with different pucks, and it didn't work, so they just resorted to whatever. I don't know. I guess they just resorted to what they're using now. But again, it's tough. It's because like you don't see the punches land because they're so quick, and not only are they different colors now because it's like it's just your skin, right? But like it's smaller too, right? Because a fist is obviously smaller than a boxing glove or an MMA glove. So again, it's harder to see, and it's smaller. They're going a lot faster. So it's not, I mean, you know, I know you have the hand wraps, but for me, it's tougher to score fights when you're watching BKFC. Now, I know that the obvious, that rather the average fan isn't saying, oh, okay, look, 1, 2, 3, let me tally up these punches. He won this round. He won this round. I understand that. But for the people that are like, want to like tally it up, score fights, make predictions, all that stuff, it's going to be hard. You know, I don't mind it, whatever, do your thing, but it's going to be hard to get people to really be able to decipher a lot of times who landed more in a close fight. But that's just me. Now, we got a big fight this weekend. UFC Vegas, 49 now? Bobby Green versus Islam Makhachev. Obviously, this was a fight that was scheduled to be Islam Makhachev versus Beneil Dariush. Beneil Dariush had to pull out because of an injury. No shame in that. It is what it is. And Bobby Green stepped up. Now, the whole story to this fight is awesome because you got a guy in Bobby Green right now who is pretty much on fire. He's won his last 2 fights and is looking like he's at the peak of his career, performance-wise, skill-wise, and confidence-wise in terms of like his growth of popularity with the fans, everything. He's at the top of the top right now in terms of where he's been in his career. It's interesting because you got to respect the guy as a fighter and as a man. Okay? Everybody that they offered in the top 10, I'm not saying every top 10 guy, but they offered a few guys in the top 10 at least this fight, right? They all turned down the Islam fight. Nobody wanted to take it, especially on short notice, and I kind of get it. But for Bobby Green to accept an Islam Makhachev fight on like, what, 10, 12 days notice? Does not get any more gangster than that. does not get any more badass than that. Like, he is literally like a Nate Diaz, like a Jorge Masvidal. Like, put respect on this man's name. And do you hear what he was saying? Which we'll probably get into those quotes later on if it's in the MMA news. Where he was calling out to all the lightweights pretty much. He was saying, you're all punks. You know, like, I took this fight. Like, they obviously offered a lot more ranked guys this fight. You didn't take it. We're talking about a guy he's badass, man. Like, he talks the talk, but damn it, like, he walks the walk too. Rest assured, he walks the walk, man. Let's get into the fight stylistically. Here's where I hate it. Now, I liked it a little bit at first until I went back and I saw some Islam Makhachev fights, like his last 4 fights. Saw some Bobby Green fights, like his last 4 fights. You know, it almost cemented what I pretty much knew, but it set it in stone. And it almost makes me want to double down on it now that Islam is pretty much going to dominate the fight. Like, it's not even going to be close pretty much. I'm sorry to Bobby Green. I'm a fan, but I just don't. I could see Islam finishing him. Islam actually said, I believe it was yesterday in the press conference, in this, you know, leading up to this fight, that he thinks he's going to finish Bobby Green early. He thinks he's going to finish Bobby Green in the first round on the ground. And he said that Bobby Green's going to be talking first when they stand up, which, of course, because Bobby has that style. He likes to trash. He's a very confident fighter standing up. So he talks, you know, he says, oh, miss me, this, that, the other. Islam Makhachev said that Bobby's going to talk early on in the fight, but Bobby's going to stop talking rather once they get to the ground, and Islam's going to be the one talking. I think he said something along those lines. But Islam did say that he's going to finish him in the first round. And I don't know, like, here's the thing. If you saw the Hooker fight, he got to his legs quick, man, like, very quick. Now, overall, stylistically, Bobby Green poses absolutely no threat on the ground. Even when Islam, let's say that Bobby Green even had the caliber of like a Ramos. If you remember the Ramos fight against Islam Makhachev, which was a fairly close fight, and it stayed standing for like 90% of the fight because Islam respected him enough on the ground. He respected Ramos enough on the ground. But when it got to the ground, you saw the level difference between him and Islam. What about when Islam fought, his name was Saryukin, I believe. When Islam fought Saryukin, who's a stud jiu-jitsu guy, stud guy on the ground, very good wrestling exchanges and takedowns. Islam handled him on the ground, like handedly. You know what I mean? Like, it was a pretty good fight, of course. Islam actually did get taken out a couple times in that fight. But Saryukin's a guy who's extremely high-level grappling, and Islam, for the most part, made him look like a fool. Bobby Green is not on the level of a Ramos, of a Saryukin on the ground, right? So Bobby Green has no chance on the ground. Absolutely no chance, right? Obviously, his best bet is to keep the fight standing. Now, I will say this. Islam's never fought a striker as good as Bobby Green. And I think Bobby Green's proved it. Because look what he did to Ali Quinta. Lit him up. His last 2 fights, Ali Quinta and Nasrat, it was just like a display where it looked like those guys didn't even belong in, like, on his level. Now we're talking about Nasrat and then Ali Quinta, a guy who's fought the who's who. Ali Quinta, a guy, look what he did to Khabib. Look what Ali Quinta did to Khabib. And look what Bobby Green did to Ali Quinta. You know what I mean? Obviously, MMA math doesn't really work like that. But now I say, look what Ali Quinta did to Khabib. I mean, like, you know, he survived. He survived him through 5 rounds. He did fairly good in that fight. He held his own. Khabib dominated, but still. But I'm saying that guy looked like an amateur against Bobby Green. You know, Bobby Green is not to be messed with. Look at Bobby Green in the Nasrat fight, even before that. Very close fight. Even the 2 fights before these 2 wins that he had that he lost, technically, if you look at the Nasrat fight, it was a very close fight in the overall strikes. Now, Nasrat did win the first 2 rounds, which I understand, and I would have given him the round. And that was the difference, was the kicks in that round that just Nasrat landed and Bobby didn't. But I believe Bobby did enough almost to win that fight. If they would have given it to Bobby, I wouldn't have minded. The fight before that, where he fought Ramos, the same guy that fought, or was it Saryukin? No, I believe it was Ramos. The fight before that, where he fought Ramos, same guy who fought Islam a few fights ago, Bobby Green won that fight. Like, go back and watch that fight. I implore you to do that. And tell me that Bobby Green didn't win that fight, didn't win 2 rounds in that fight. Like, I don't know, that's what I think, at least. So, you know, on paper, you're looking at a guy who's like, oh, he's a journeyman, you know, 2-2 in his last 4, whatever. No. If he's losing fights, I don't even think he lost those fights. Maybe maybe the Fiziev fight, maybe. We'll give him that one. But if you look at it, all competitive, like for the most part, recently, like in his last 10, even in losses, like he doesn't even get finished like that. For the most part, in recent history, except for like Dustin Poirier and all that shit, he's not a guy who's getting finished like that either. So it's going to be a very interesting fight in the sense of like the storyline. Because in the octagon, I don't see it being that competitive, but it's going to be fun. You know, the little build up to it leading up to this Saturday is going to be fun. So, you know, we'll see what happens. Here's the thing that also favors Islam a little bit in the stand-up, actually. Bobby Green, if there's one thing that you could actually beat him with or maybe neutralize him with on the scorecards in the stand-up with, is kicks. He throws kicks, but he's more of a punch-heavy guy, right? Like, he has that style where he likes to keep his hands down, punches. And that's going to be a little bit troubling for Islam because Islam Makhachev's never faced a guy with that hands-down style, that Israel Adesanya style. Bobby Green fights hands down in the hips. So what's the problem with that? Like DC always says on commentary, or no, not DC. Anytime that you watch a Bobby Green fight, it'll be Dean Thomas that he'll come on commentary and say, that's the thing. Bobby's got his hands down at his waist, so you don't know when the punches are coming. You don't know where they're coming from. A guy who's got the punches up here at his guard and is guarding with his punches, you're going to see where those punches are coming from. And it's very true. So, again, Bobby Green, Islam's never fought a guy with that style of striking like Bobby Green. So that's the one thing that's different that he hasn't seen. If you want to say like, oh, yeah, he's fought like Dan Hooker though, he's a good striker. Dan Hooker, different style from Bobby Green in the stand-up. You know, Bobby's a lot more loose, a lot more, I'd say, versatile, a lot quicker. Maybe not quicker, but he's a lot more lucid. He's a very lucid striker. So it's going to be interesting. Islam's never faced a guy like that in the stand-up. However, again, to get back to the leg kick thing, after I went on that little soliloquy, to get back to the leg kick thing, Islam likes to throw kicks. He has success with the leg kick, with that low kick and the body kick, and he likes to even throw the high kick a lot of times with his left kick when he's in that orthodox stance, I believe. And that works well against southpaws. Bobby Green likes to switch stances sometimes a lot. You never know. Like, he could be open to a head kick. Or if Islam like sees that the leg kicks are working, the calf kicks, the low leg kicks, he could even continue to employ that strategy. So he could even start to do more than hold his own in the striking exchanges in that fight. So Bobby's got to be careful with the kicks, because that's the one thing that if you come with a very kick heavy attack, you could sort of keep up almost with Bobby in the striking exchanges, because he's gonna let it go with his hands, but he doesn't let it go with his feet as much. And Islam has that tool. He actually has a very good kick. His kicks are very good. So it's going to be interesting to see the two styles collide. Again, I do see an Islam Makhachev finish, unfortunately, because I am a Bobby Green fan. I see an Islam Makhachev finish just inside like 2 rounds, something like that. You know, he gets to his neck, guillotine, you know, Kimura, something like that, triangle, something like that I think will happen. And here's the thing. I've seen Bobby in like the Ramos fight. I've seen Bobby foolishly go for takedowns before. And if you look at it, Bobby Green almost lost the Ramos fight because he went for the takedown, and then he was at that point on the ground with a guy who was on the ground with a guy who was better than him on the ground in Ramos. He's a black belt in BJJ. So, again, if you're Bobby Green, don't do anything funny like that and try to take him down like you've done before, like once or twice. Don't do that, because that's not going to go your way. But I don't think he's smart. He's smart enough to not do that. So it's going to be interesting to see the two styles collide. Again, I got Islam winning. But can you imagine what would happen if Bobby Green won that fight? Like, just imagine everyone's reactions. The MMA world would absolutely erupt if Bobby Green won that fight. How interesting would that be? And the question would be, would he deserve a title shot? To me, he would. You just beat the number 3, number 4 guy in the world, whatever he is. A guy who's pretty much the boogeyman at 55 now. A guy who I think is going to be champion inevitably. You beat that guy? Yeah, you should probably fight for a title. Because who else? Who else at that point? Chandler? No. Dustin Poirier? No. The loser of Gaethje Oliveira, who will be champion at that point? No. RDA? No. Not yet. RDA? Definitely not. Ferguson? No. No, like, he's the guy. He's it. He's next. So, again, I got Islam, but fuck, man. Bobby Green all the way. Like, I'm a fan. So that's it for last weekend's, or for this, the main event for this weekend, UFC Vegas 49. Let us now get into this week's top 5. For this week, we're doing the top 5 dark horses in the UFC. Now, if one's ahead of the other on the list, pound for pound, it doesn't mean that one can beat the other. It depends on, your current situation, where you are as a fighter, and your weight class. So at number 5, we're starting off with Arnold Allen. Now, this is a guy who is undefeated in the UFC. He's a guy who I would describe as a pretty vicious fighter. A guy who, in terms of pressure, who really walks people down more, who applies more pressure than this guy in the 145-pound weight class. He's a guy that definitely brings a fight. He punches hard. Maybe not the greatest guy in the stand-up department, but definitely good enough. Definitely good enough defensively and offensively to where he can get on the inside and then play his game. Get into those clinch exchanges, because most times at that weight class, he's going to have the advantage in those clinching and those grappling exchanges when it's on the ground. The guy on the ground, nasty submissions, nasty guillotines, nasty submissions and guillotines standing as well, not just on the ground. So very versatile in the jiu-jitsu department as well. So he's a guy you got to watch out for. He's a dark horse because nobody talks about him. Nobody even talks about him enough, at least in terms of like title relevancy. He's a guy who could really climb to the top of this division by the end of this year for sure. He could be in the title hunt by the end of 2022. Maybe even gets a title shot by the end of 2022. We just saw Korean Zombie get a title shot. Speak of Korean Zombie, let's take a look at everyone else in his division. If we look at the rankings and where he is currently at 145 pounds, he's only got 6 guys ahead of him, right? So we got Josh Emmett, Calvin Kattar, Korean Zombie. So Josh Emmett's got to win a couple fights still, right? He's around the same ballpark, I'd say, in terms of relevancy in the 145-pound weight class. Calvin Kattar, I'd say he's around that same ballpark right now, around that same tier in terms of how far they are from a title shot. Korean Zombie's getting the title shot, so I believe he'll lose to Volkanovski. Once he gets eliminated from there, he'll be out of it for at least a while. Yair Rodriguez, I'd put him in the same class. And Ortega, I'd put him in the same class. I'd put him in the same class as those 5 guys ahead of him in terms of they all have a shot to get a title shot very, very soon. The only ones that I'd say are above him in terms of relevancy in the division are Max Holloway and Volkanovski, who's the champion. Other than that, Arnold Allen's as much of a live dog in that division as anybody. He's a guy who, again, a good striker, great grappler. You know what I mean? And he's got some pop in his hands. He's got power. It's going to be interesting to see him in the Dan Hooker fight, because Dan Hooker's a guy who brings a fight as well. How many dog fights you seen Dan Hooker in? Like, I think that's going to be a bloody war, man. I think that's going to be a very good fight. I would give maybe Hooker the slight advantage in the striking department, which I think he is a better striker for sure, more proven for sure, better track record in striking for sure, more experienced. But Arnold Allen, when it comes to like the grappling exchanges and whatnot, I think he'll get him there. Coming in at number 4 on the list of the top 5 dark horses in the UFC, we're going with Sean Brady. Now, Sean Brady is a guy who we talk about submissions. Man, Sean Brady's submissions are nasty. A guy who is so well-rounded. The way he can just control fights on the ground is great. That guy finishes people a lot in submissions. So, like, we know that that's his area of strength. That's where he just wants to take the fight. He wants the fight to go to the ground. And when you have an ability like that, it's gonna pretty much give you an advantage over a lot of the opponents that you're facing. Because I'll tell you what, if you think he's a bum in the stand-up, he's not. Ask Michael Chiesa that went to his corner at the end of a round after one of the fights with him, and he said, damn, like, he's got power. Like, Sean Brady can put people out. We've seen him knock people out before, so that's not a problem. And we know what he could do on the ground. Now, he's a guy who is 15-0, and he's faced top flight competition throughout his entire career. In his last promotion, the promoter of the last promotion that he fought for said that he was the best guy to ever come out of that promotion. An incredible promotion at that. So Sean Brady is someone that he's a player, man. Like, he literally just beat Chiesa. Now, where does that put you if you just beat Chiesa? You know what I mean? Here's the one thing about the Chiesa fight that does worry me, and maybe it's something that he exerted a little bit too much in that fight trying to get Chiesa to the ground, or maybe he did exert a bit energy in the ground or in those clinching exchanges with Chiesa because Chiesa's that good on the ground that it took more effort from him than it would for someone who's maybe a lesser opponent in terms of the grappling. But he was dead after that Chiesa fight. He was gassed out, absolutely tired, blew his gas tank. Go look at the end of that fight. He was literally panting on the floor after the fight was over. So again, if that was a 5-round fight, where would it have gone? Or if that, you know what I mean? Like it makes you wonder. So again, has he worked on his cardio? Because in the last fight, you saw a couple questionable things. Is it something that was just from that camp specifically? Who knows? But because I never seen any signs of like crazy cardio loss or fatigue throughout any of his fights. But in that last fight, it was a little bit weird. Nonetheless, he looked impressive in the fight, right? He won the fight. And one thing that he did against Chiesa and that he's done throughout his career is he's very good at just controlling you, right? He's very good and extensively in terms of the control time in a fight. So he'll be able to put you in positions to where he's controlling the fight, whether he's on top of you, whether he's grinding you against the fence. He's always seems to be in a lot of those positions in his fights, which even if he doesn't finish you, it'll go his way a lot of times because he's controlling the pace of the fight almost. So he's someone that's not to be played with. You look at the rankings, and where is this guy at 170 pounds? I think probably in the number 9 ballpark, right? Yes, so he's number 9, which is weird because was Chiesa not in the top 7, not in the top 6? So you would think that warrants a top 6 ranking for him. But again, look at him. I mean, he's number 9. He's not really touching anyone right now in the top 5 or the champ. Here's why. But this is also why he's a dark horse, because he's slept on right now. And there's like a list of like dogs at 70 in like the top 5. He's literally right behind them. He's chomping at the bit to get in there, to get into that conversation. So we got Usman, the champion, right? He's about to fight, right? Or we think he's going to get his next fight booked for this summer, hopefully. Colby Covington, he lost to the champion twice. So in terms of title shot, not really. Gilbert Burns lost to Usman. Gilbert Burns still has to fight Hamzat, so he's booked up as well. And I don't know how that Hamzat fight's going to go for him, if I'm being honest. But that's a whole nother conversation. Leon Edwards seems like he's fighting Kamaru Usman next, right? So they're both booked up. Bilal Muhammad is fighting Vicente Luque, so that's 4 and 5 right there, booked up. Jorge Masvidal is fighting Colby Covington. Both those guys, again, lost to the champ twice. And then we got Wonderboy, who's kind of out of the title picture right now. Neil Magny, who's kind of out of the title picture right now. So it's a good opportunity for Sean Brady to hop in. Like, there's no clear-cut guy at 170 right now, except for, like, Leon Edwards. And then maybe Hamzat down the line, but there's no, like, clear-cut, oh, he has to fight for the title. If Gilbert beats Hamzat, yeah, we're probably talking Gilbert might get a rematch. But, again, Sean Brady's won 2 fights away from a title shot. 2 fights. Yeah, I'd say one's a little bit too harsh, but 2 fights, it's not crazy to say Sean Brady's 2 fights away from a title fight, 1 fight away from a #1 contender fight. Not crazy to say that at all. So, again, he is a dark horse at 170 pounds. Slept on. And he's dangerous. At number 3, we're going with Magomed Ankalaev. Now, this guy, like Khabib, like Islam, he is scary. And I'm not saying he's like Khabib and Islam complete, because he's not. He could strike. Like, this guy, in terms of and I bring up Khabib and Islam Makhachev because, they're obviously incredible at wrestling, but this guy's wrestling is very, very good. This guy's got nasty double leg takedowns. If you watch any of his fights, extremely effective takedowns. You can tell he works on those extensively. Extremely vicious ground and pound. Like, he has one of the most vicious ground and pounds in the game. Like, I implore you to go watch and see this guy's ground and pound when he's finishing guys on the ground. The bombs he lands and the accuracy on them is absolutely incredible. Incredible. And not only that, not only is he a very good wrestler, very good in the submission department as well, he's got a Greco-Roman and a Sambo background. So not only that, but the guy on the feet is a fucking problem. Like, even if he didn't have any of those Sambo credentials, any of those Greco-Roman credentials, if he didn't have any of that stuff on the ground, he's a problem on the feet. He would still be putting guys away on the feet. Let's just start off with his kicks. My God. His head kicks, his body kicks. Like, anything from the body up, that guy throws absolutely devastating kicks, man. Like, knockout caliber kicks. If he catches you with one of those hard head kicks, you're going out. You're going out. And he's done it to people before. So we're talking about a guy who is dangerous. Like, nobody wants to fight this guy in that division. And here's the thing. Nobody really talks about him that much when it comes to, oh, title shot at 205. It's almost like Yuri, right? We're talking about Yuri a lot. But, like, this guy is coming. And now, granted, look, Yuri's next. But I don't know. I feel like there's not enough talk about Magomed Ankalaev. You know what I mean? And he's got a big matchup in the top 10. He's got Thiago Santos coming up next. You know what I mean? And that's something that if he wins that fight, you're in business, bro. You win that fight, you're in the top 5. You win that fight, you might be fighting for the title next. And again, who wants to fight this guy? Like, if Glover needed if there was ever an equal to Glover on the ground, shit, you got it right there. Maybe Glover's better on the ground, but this guy can damn sure hold his own on the ground. Like, he's not going to be a deer in headlights on the ground. Not even close. Like, he could actually win on the ground. But I'm saying at the very least, he's not going to be a deer in headlights on the ground like Anthony Smith was, like Thiago Santos was against Glover Teixeira. No, sir. And in the stand-up, he has the advantage. He's got the advantage over a lot of guys in the stand-up. It is not crazy to say he knocks Thiago Santos out. It's not crazy to say Thiago Santos knocks him out because he's a very good stand-up guy. But good power in his hands, again. But, it's not crazy to say Magomed Ankalaev can knock Thiago Santos out. And what I mean by that is I'm not saying that's what's going to happen, but I'm saying that's how good his striking is. So a complete fighter, a scary fighter. What is he now, number 6? He's number 6 in the division. He's fighting number 5 next. That puts you in the top 5. Might even put you higher if somebody else loses in the top 5. So dark horse, I struggle to put this guy higher on the list because he is if there's a dark horse, he is certainly a dark horse in the UFC to be a champion. Absolutely. At number 2, we're going with Tatiana Suarez, a girl who is an incredible wrestler. Some people say that, again, not to bring him up, sound like a broken record, but some people have actually said she's like the Khabib of like women's MMA. And it's almost true. Like, she is very, very good at wrestling. Now, here's the thing. Here's why I think so highly of Tatiana Suarez. If you look at the landscape of female mixed martial artists, especially in the UFC, like, do you really see a crazy specialist on the ground? Do you really see a crazy BJJ girl, but that's putting people away left and right like that? Do you really see like a crazy wrestling specialist female that's really putting girls away like that? Like, she is a legit specialist in her weight class and like just in the sport overall. She is one of the few specialists in the UFC, honestly. Not in the sport overall, but I'd say more so in the UFC. She's one, like, and again, when you're a wrestler, like, you have the advantage over a lot of people in a fight. And she seems to be a lot stronger than a lot of these girls, too. So, again, she's nasty. The only problem with Tatiana Suarez that's held her back is the injuries. You know, she's had a rough go with the injuries the last few years. You know, most recently, I believe it's a neck injury that she's coming back from. So, again, I don't know what the timetable on it is. I don't know how far along she is in her recovery. But when she's active, I mean, what are we talking about here? She's one of the top 3 girls in the world. Don't even tell me she's not. She beat Alexa Grasso. Who else did she? I believe she also beat she beat somebody else as well. She beat Carla Esparza as well. Is Carla Esparza not fighting Rose Namajunas next, if I'm not mistaken? So, I mean, she's beaten these girls when they were all in the top 5 in the division. She's beaten top 10 girls as well in the division. She's an undefeated mixed martial artist. Never lost in her career. What is she, 9-0? So it's always a rarity when you're dealing with an undefeated fighter as well. Let's see. Yeah, she's 9-0. Look at this. She beat Nina Nunes, beat Carla Esparza, beat Alexa Grasso, beat Viviane Pereira, beat Amanda Cooper in the UFC. Impressive. And, like, she just imposes her will on people. She has a very dominant style that translates to winning fights. Watch out for Tatiana Suarez. I'm really hopeful that, you know, she gets back on track from all the injury stuff, because we're talking about someone who's very good. Now let's pull up the rankings and see how she matches up, because I'll tell you what, when we're looking at strawweight, I mean, come on. Besides Wei Li, Rose, and Joanna, she beats everyone else, and I'm not even batting an eye. She beats everyone else. Marina Rodriguez, whatever, cool. Mackenzie Dern, Nina Nunes already beat it. Tisha Torres, Michelle Waters. She beats all of them. All of them. They're not handling her wrestling. She beats them all. Here's the thing. How would she do in a fight against the three girls that we had mentioned, right? Against Rose, Weili, Joanna, which are clear cut, the cream of the crop at the strawweight in the strawweight division, right, for the females. So you got to ask yourself, is she a bad matchup for them? She is, but they're also a bad matchup for her, because we've seen some bad tendencies in her striking. We've seen her be exposed before in the striking game, so it is a little bit worrisome at times. You know, we've seen that she's not the greatest striker ever. Like, she definitely tends to lean more towards her wrestling. Her striking's definitely has some holes. And, you know, if you look at somebody like Rose, right? Somebody like Joanna, Weili, who are absolute master strikers in female MMA, like, she could be in trouble there, right? So I hope it's something that she worked on. That's why I'm not going all out and saying, like, oh, she's going to be champion. If this girl had a semblance of the striking that the three I just mentioned did, and which she can, because A, she's young, and B, she's still working on it. She's got time to work on it. If she can get there, she will be champion. She will be champion for a long time. No one's going to beat her. Her style, if she gets up there in the striking, she's going to be tough to deal with. Definitely a dark horse. No one talks about her enough, and I guess a lot of that's because of the injuries. But, yeah. Tatiana Suarez, she's unranked right now, but when you're out of the rank, you know, when you don't fight for that long, it makes sense. But she's a girl that should easily come back, should, in my opinion, get a top 5 fighter, because if you're a top 5 fighter, you might not want to fight her, but guess what? On name value alone, you know she's a bad girl. So if you beat her, that's good for you too. So I think she can get a top 5, top 10 fight if she comes back. I don't see why not. Again, though, super dark horse. Like, probably definitely the biggest dark horse in female MMA, in my opinion, at least in the UFC. Maybe not Bellator, other promotions, but in the UFC, definitely. Super talented. Coming in at number 1, we're going with Tom Aspinall, a guy that I'm a big fan of. And he's got a big fight. He is a dark horse, right? And again, he can definitely climb into that top 5 contenders right into his next fight. He's fighting in a couple weeks at UFC London. He's fighting Alexander Volkov. We know that. That's going to be a great card. Overall, it's like a fucking pay-per-view, that card. But Tom Aspinall reminds me of like this new breed of heavyweights almost, sort of like Cyril Gane, like just extremely high. Like, it's almost not like slow movements and just power and knockouts anymore. Like, I'm not saying that's what a lot of these heavyweights are, but like the evolution of heavyweights, that's how it started for the most part. It was just guys swinging and banging. You know what I mean? It was like, who's going to drop first? Tom Aspinall's a guy who's bringing skill. He's bringing technique. You know what I mean? He's bringing quality to the heavyweight division. He's bringing, I'd say, a new era. Him and Cyril Gane have almost brought a new era to the heavyweight division, where we're seeing these heavyweight fighters be extremely skilled. And hell, if you want to throw Francis in there too, from what he did in the Cyril fight with the wrestling, you could do that as well. You know, but again, nasty striking, great knockout power. If you look at him against Andrei Arlovsky, Andrei Arlovsky's developed this new style over the years since he lost some of his power, lost some of his athleticism. Andrei Arlovsky's developed sort of this new sort of style where he's trying not to get hit as much anymore, because he knows he can't dish out as much damage. So he's a bit more cautious now. Aspinall was able to get inside and land bombs on him. And if you look at Arlovsky's last 5 fights or so, he's done a very good job of hitting but not getting hit. Look what Tom Aspinall was able to do to him in that fight. Very impressive. And he's a guy who is just pretty much a beast, man. Like, he could bring in that new audience as well. He can bring in that British audience as well. You know, I'm sure he'll get a pop at UFC London. You know, you get a big win like that over Alexander Volkov in your home country, and that's star quality shit right there. That's how stars are made. You know what I mean? Just ask Darren Till, who he trains with, by the way, and says he's a bad MFer. So again, just seems more skilled than most of the heavyweights. That's why he's going to be a top 3 guy. Like, you got like guys like Tuivasa who are in the top 3 right now. Love Tuivasa. But Tom Aspinall's got the skill on a lot of these guys. Like guys like Tom Aspinall and Cyril Gane. So again, look, he's fighting Alexander Volkov, who's ranked number 6, right? But Derek Lewis is ranked number 5. Derek Lewis has lost his last couple fights by knockout bad. If Tom Aspinall puts up an impressive performance, there's no reason to think that he can't leapfrog Derek Lewis also. And all those, like, he can jump into the top 5, not just the top 6. He might not just take Volkov's spot. So definitely a dark horse. Definitely a guy who I think people do recognize him as like a future contender, but I'm recognizing him as a guy who could be fighting for a belt like this year. Literally like this year. That's how good he is. So he's a dark. If there's ever a dark horse in this sport, Tom Aspinall certainly one. He's a guy who proven track record. I mean, what's he 11-2 now? But if you look at his record, beat Spivak right by KO. Beat Arlovsky by submission, which was impressive. The fact that he's beating these guys by submission and doing what he's doing in the stand-up makes him dangerous in all aspects. Like even if he's facing a specialist in terms of grappling and wrestling, he's good enough on the ground to where he'll hold his own, get it back standing, and then do what he has to do. He's very good on the ground. Defensively, he's very good as well if he needs it. So again, Spivak KO, Andre Arlovsky submission, Alan Badeau KO, Collier KO. You know, 4-0 in the UFC, 4 finishes. Exciting as ever. A couple losses early in his career, but again, what are you doing in the big time? Like a lot of times I look at these guys and I don't look at the overall record. You got to look at what they're doing in the UFC, what they're doing now, where they are now in their career in the UFC. What are they doing at the top of the top? And he's a guy who's walking the damn walk, man. He's got it. He's got it. And again, he could even become a star. Get a big finish in a crowd like in front of a crowd like the O2 Arena in London in a couple weeks. And Dana, you got a star. So, and again, when have we had like a British heavyweight star, like a heavier weight class guy like that? Like I can't remember one. You know, in terms of like international, Mark Hunt, because he's Samoan, but like from like the European side or from like England, that area, I can't really think of one. So he would actually be an exciting guy to have in the top 5 if he became a star and he just became a guy who we took like serious, because I take him serious for sure. But I feel like he's a little bit slept on, so I'm going to say he's the #1 dark horse in the UFC right now. Now let's get into some MMA news to close out the show. As always, we are accrediting MMAfighting.com, best source for MMA news. So let's start at the top. Austin Vanderford, so who we know is fighting in the next Bellator pay-per-view. He's fighting for the belt against Gegard Mousasi. He says, I want everyone to be like Paige Van Zandt's husband is really fucking badass after Bellator 275. If you watch Austin Vanderford, he's a very good fighter. Very good on the ground. Like, he's got it, man. You got to put some respect on his name. He said, it's fun and happy to, he said, Austin Vanderford says, it's fun and I'm happy to be the underdog because I want that feeling. I want everybody to be like Paige Van Zandt's husband really is fucking badass. It pumps me up even talking about it. It makes me want to cry. I get so emotional and so excited about it. I guess he doesn't mind. Here's the thing, when your wife is Paige Van Zandt or your girlfriend, like, it's almost inevitable. Like, I'm not saying I don't feel sorry for the dude, but like, shit, man, your wife's hot. Like, you know what I mean? She's like a model. BKFC founder definitely making a play for Francis Ngannou. Gives update on Paige Van Zandt. Man. Again, if you're the UFC, Francis cannot go. You can't let him go to another promotion. Would Francis even want to go to another promotion? That's why I do think it'll work out. Let's hope it works out. But just imagine what we were talking about before with the cuts and like the damage in BKFC. Imagine Francis Ngannou fighting bare knuckle. Like, how crazy would that be? Now, this is very interesting. Triller acquires majority stake in bare knuckle fighting championship. What the hell? So a freak show or a clown show bought a freak show. I mean, it makes sense. I'm joking, but like, all jokes aside, this is funny though. So BKFC founder David Feldman revealed the news Wednesday on the MMA Hour. We grew this thing to a point where we thought that we got it as far as we could take it by ourselves right now, Feldman said on the MMA Hour. We've overcome so many obstacles and so many people telling us no. And this will never happen. You'll never make it work. And we got to a point where we're pretty well accepted among the combat sports community right now. And we need to make a partnership that was going to take us to the next level, create more opportunities, more resources, more funding, more things like that to acquire some more fighters, take care of the fighters that are already there, and just create more opportunities for everybody. All right. Pretty interesting. Chad Mendes leaning towards fighting for BKFC again. Open to UFC return with contract renegotiation. What? He's open to a UFC return? He also said BKFC was the most fun he's had in his career, his debut. He said, for me right now, fighting isn't something that I have to do for money, Mendes said. Fighting, especially this fight, is all a bonus. I still have that competitive drive and wanted to get back in there and compete again. So I guess there was probably less weight on my shoulders. The pay part of it, back in the mixed martial arts days where it's like you only get half your money, that weighs on you. And I have the business. I have multiple businesses now outside of fighting that are doing well and are fun. And that's kind of like my bread and butter now. Like I said, this is just a bonus. So I guess he wants to come back. He doesn't mind it. So he talks about UFC. He says, I'd be open to talking, but it would have to be really good money. Okay, so that's a little overblown. He just said, in terms of his UFC return, he said, I'd be open to talking, but it would have to be real good money. So it's like he really wants just a substantial amount of money, right? Video shows John Jones headbutting police car, tells officers, hurt me and kill me. This was a rough one, man. Now, this one, you know, the video from what I saw, it was John Jones, you know, getting arrested after the night where he was inducted in the Hall of Fame. Or no, the same fucking night, wasn't it, right? I mean, even as I'm saying it, like, you try to defend the guy, you try to be a fan of the guy, and it's like you think about like the stupid shit, like, what are you doing getting arrested the night that you get inducted into the Hall of Fame? Like, you know what I mean? It's such a John Jones thing to do. Because I was going to say, like, I kind of feel bad at a lot of, like, the backlash he's getting. Like, when you're talking about kicking someone when you're down, like, John Jones has not been kicked. He's been punted when he's been down. Now, I get it. It's like he's an easy target because he's made a mistake after mistake. But, again, man, like, nobody's perfect. Now, here's the thing. I'm not a John Jones fanboy. I've actually lost a lot of respect for John throughout the years. I'm not nearly as big a fan as I used to be. But I don't hate the guy. Like, nobody's perfect in this world. We all make mistakes. You know, I'm not perfect. I have my issues. So you have to understand that the guy is on a much bigger scale. He's in a magnifying glass because he's maybe the MMA GOAT. He's in a huge organization, and he's maybe the best fighter of all time. So a lot of people, he's going to have a lot of pressure on him, a lot of attention on him, right? And with that attention comes a lot of responsibility. But if he was bagging groceries at a supermarket, nobody would bat an eye. I'm not saying that makes it right, but I'm saying, again, can we have a little empathy for the guy? Like, if he needs help, he needs help. Is he negligent to get help? Maybe that's the issue here. Maybe he's not getting the real help that he needs. But this guy definitely needs help, man. I don't know what it is. Now, the video, it's pretty much just footage of him getting handcuffed by a police officer, and he's asking, so they describe it here. He says, bro, hang me, hurt me, and kill me. What did I do? And then he cries, right? He says, a black man can't drink, getting elected into the Hall of Fame, and this is what I've got. This is what he's saying to the cops. He's being handcuffed, pretty much, in the beginning of the video. And then he begins jumping up and down. He yells, I hate you. And then what he does is he fucking strikes the hood of the car with his head. So that's where the whole head butted a car came from. So he's handcuffed, and he fucking takes his head and slams his head on the hood of the car, which is ridiculous, which is crazy. And they were like, John, you need to chill. You understand? And whatever. He just complied. Then they took him inside, you know, arrested him, whatever, put him in the car. But it was nasty. But again, I just feel bad, man, because, like, all these people that are criticizing John Jones, like, I'd love for somebody to pull up the most embarrassing video of your life and post that on the internet, see how you feel. Like, would you want that to happen? Now, I'm not saying the video shouldn't be out there. Like, it's public. The video is, it's public. You know, it's a police officer recorded. It's a police recording. So it could be open to the public. There's nothing wrong with that. But again, it's almost like you're going to punt the man while he's down. But at the same time, it's like, John, you need to learn your lesson. Like, you need to get real help. Like, because whatever's happening is not working. So I'm not one-sided on this. I do see both sides. But it's just a tough situation, man, because this guy's literally the GOAT. I think he is. Michael Bisping. Darren Till is telling me truly terrifying. Michael Bisping, first of all, says, Darren Till is telling me, quote, truly terrifying things about training with Khamzat Chimaev. This is just funny for two reasons. One, the whole Darren Till and Khamzat relationship is awesome. I love it. Like they could have like a show together and it would be like the greatest thing in MMA. But the second reason is, like I've just been saying, like a lot of people just don't want to admit this about Khamzat because they think it's early, whatever. Like Khamzat is just that damn good. He's the real deal. Like this is proof. Yes, he is that good. The war stories that Gustafsson says, now the war stories Darren Till is saying. Like, so Bisping says, I am hearing things about Khamzat that are truly terrifying. Bisping said this on his YouTube channel. As I said, and again, this is all from MMAfighting.com. Bisping said on his YouTube channel, as I said, Darren Till is out there. I've got a bunch of friends out in Sweden. They're filming and they're calling me up and saying, holy fucking shit, Khamzat is a real deal. He worked his ass off, trains like a motherfucker, lifting weights, pushing everyone in the room. Great stand-up, great wrestling. Khamzat is undeniable, man. Like, people are going to understand this guy. They're going to understand how good this guy is sooner or later. With Mandy Bohm out, Miranda Maverick steps in to face Sabina Mazo at UFC Vegas 50. Okay. It's a good upgrade there. Or not upgrade, but a modification to the female bout at UFC Vegas 50. Bobby Green, so the morning report. Bobby Green planning to force an exciting fight with fucking boring Islam Makhachev. So that's what he said. He said he's fucking boring in his press conference. You know, maybe he is. It's a boring style, but it's a damn effective style. But again, I'm a fan of Bobby. Aoki versus Akiyama set for Japanese MMA Legends fight at 1X. Former title challenger Alexis Davis, Danilo Marquez no longer on UFC roster. UFC bantamweight Ziviad Lascivilush, Jesus, what a nightmare of a name, suspended 10 months for USADA violation. Viral sensation Dale Brown details his work with Joaquin Buckley. Absolutely would corner him again. If we see Dale Brown back in the UFC, the memes are going to be fucking spectacular. So this is something that I wanted to read about. It's interesting that I don't know nothing about this, and I want to sort of look into this. So it says, UFC Vegas 48 medical suspensions. Jamal Hill among 10 fighters potentially out for 6 months. Why? Why Hill, though? So Jamal Hill must have x-rays on... Oh, because of the elbow. That's right. Because I was wondering, why is Jamal Hill... I thought he got out relatively unscathed. I was like, why is he having a 6-month suspension? Medical suspension or whatever it is. But yeah, that... When you saw he was checking those kicks from Johnny Walker with one arm... Oh, man. He literally had like a lump on his forearm. If you saw after the fight, it was crazy. So as far as news, that pretty much does it. Yeah, it's been a good weekend of fights. Been another good show. Thank you, everyone, for watching. Again, subscribe to us on all platforms. We are on Instagram. We are on TikTok. We are on Twitter. If you want to listen to us besides YouTube, we are also on Spotify and SoundCloud. Or Spotify and Anchor FM, rather. Speaking of YouTube, if you have not liked and subscribed to this video, please do so at this moment in time. Thank you so much. Have a good one.